Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and the quilt behind me is a Lone Star Quilt. And it is made with a very special technique called the Bargello technique. And that's where you can use all different fabrics and strips of fabric. So you sew these strips together to get this look. The pattern is made to use yardage or jelly rolls. The pattern is a free download from Northcott. And I'm going to make this quilt in a purple variation. This is a free pattern from Northcott, and it uses their Banyan Batik Catan fabric. There are different colorways that you can do this, but I'm going to be using the purple and green. And before I start my project, I always like to wash my fabric and press it, and add a little bit of starch. That starch is going to help with all of those little seams. I'm going to cut all my strips first. If you like to use jelly rolls, you will be able to use this pattern. With all of the strips starched, pressed, and cut, I'm going to be able to put them together. They're going to be sewn together in strip sets. There are 7 different strip sets. You will be sewing the entire width of fabric together until you have this long piece of fabric. From there, you're going to cut it up. You'll only need 1 of each of the 7 strip sets. I have all of my fabrics stacked in order, and I've transferred those labels to the top of a cutting mat. Now I'm going to be able to just draw from them, following the directions, just like a deck of cards. For example, strip set 4, I start with a 5.5 inch background, 1A, a B, C, and then D, and then another D. Back to C, B, A, and my background fabric. The strip sets are going to mirror each other. So if you're starting with ABC, you're going to go ABC coming into the center. And that's why you have 2 of the same color in the middle. And by stacking them in order, it's going to help you sew them in order. And I do mark each of my strip sets. The first 6 strip sets, you're going to use the whole width of the fabric. The 7th, you only need to use half the width, because you're going to be able to make a smaller strip set. So for your last chart, you will need to take all of those fabrics and just cut them in half. And because they're going to be trimmed down, I'm just going to cut them with a pair of scissors. So I'll start with my background fabric. My A fabric will need to be cut in half. I'll put that cut in the pile. So there's my A. My B, I will also need to cut that strip in half. And to keep myself in order, I'm going to put the B on the pile and then put the B back in order. I'm going to continue following the strip set by cutting all of those strips in half. I'm going to have a smaller strip set. When I've stacked all of my 7 strip sets, I have no strips left. Once you have this all organized, it's going to go together very quickly. Here is strip set 7. Because the strip sets are mirror images of each other, each of the fabrics should be in the same order with the same color in the center and of course the same background fabric on the outside. I like to work on 1 strip set at a time. As you stitch your rows together, use a smaller stitch length. If you have a 2.5 set at your machine, you can put it right down to a 2. The smaller stitches are going to keep that strength because we will cut them apart afterwards, and that will hold them together better. Once those 2 strips are sewn together, we're going to press them twice. The first thing we're going to do is press them flat. What you want to do is press that thread inside the fibers. And by pressing, you're going to go up and down, not in this sideways motion. That sideways motion has a tendency to stretch your seams. So just pick it up and press. If you have a mat that has a line, be sure to check that the line is straight, and you can use that line to hold that fabric down. The next thing we're going to do is open the seams up flat. If you lift up the fabric, you're going to be able to just work with your hand that seam open. Make sure your strip stays nice and straight, and even if it's twisted a little bit, you're going to be able to put it back into shape. Put a little bit of starch on it. Press going up and down so that you're not stretching it or putting it out of shape. Once all your 2 strips are sewn together, put them back in order and continue sewing the strips together. All 7 of the strip sets are done, and they all follow the same sequence. We have the background fabric, A and B, background A, B, background A, B, C, A, B, C, D, and it continues. So we're always going in that alphabetical order in one direction and on the other. So the center piece is always the same color. To check them, you can put them in order this way, and then just slide all of the edges over and make sure the colors match on the other side. And lining them up, we'll be able to see that they are correct. The only difference is you've added more strips, or some of the strips are a little bit smaller. And all of the seams are pressed open and flat. From here, we're going to take these and we're going to cut the strip sets apart. The first row is the number of strip sets that we need to cut at the size, 16 at 2 inches from strip set 1. There's only 2 measurements we're going to be cutting, 2-inch strips or 1 3/4. So the first thing we're going to do is square off this end and take off that selvage. Use your strips as a guide on your ruler and then just trim off that end. From here, I'm going to be able to cut all of my segments. And for strip set 1, I need 16 cut at 2 inches. Once you have all of your strips cut, transfer your information onto the pile. As you go to cut the strip sets, you're going to find that they're way too long for a 23-inch ruler. So you'll have to fold the strip sets. Once you fold this in half, you're going to be able to just run your hand along one of those seams. And it's going to help that seam lay a little flat. It's not unpressing it, but it's just going to help it lay flat. By following a couple of the lines, it's going to assure that your strips are going to remain straight. There are 8 points to this star, and this is all the pieces we're going to need to make those 8 points. This is half of 1 block. When we sew these strips together, we're going to have 16 of them. So we're going to be able to take 8 and put them on one side and have 8 on the other. So this will be the joining strip. This is why we only have 8 cut of these. The pieces are not going to match up, but the ends will be trimmed off after. Match up the center lines and sew together. And then we're going to take them and press the seams open the same as we did the strip sets. The only seam you're going to need to match up is this center seam. If your squares match up, that's fine. If not, it's going to work out fine just the same. The number 7 strip set is the center, so we will be able to sew them together. You will have 8 complete units. So this was one side of the block, that center piece, and the other side. And it is correct to have this jagged edge. When both those sides have been sewn onto the middle, we'll have 8 big diamonds. They're the same on both sides. We're going to need to make a template to cut these out in a diamond shape. And you can use any cardboard to make that template. I'm going to do the template in a miniature style, that way you can see it on the camera. We need to draw 2 parallel lines that are 15 inches apart. The next is draw a 45-degree angle. A lot of rulers will come with that 45-degree mark. You're going to put that 45-degree mark right along the bottom edge of your first line. You're going to be able to draw a line along the one edge. This measurement from line to line will be somewhere around 21¼ inches or 21½ inches. Each line in this diamond needs to be the same. So we're going to take and measure over that 21¼ inches, and that's where our next 45-degree angle is going to go. Use that same 45-degree mark on the ruler so that the lines are going in the same direction, and draw. Each one of these 4 lines need to be the same. From here, you need to cut out that piece. Each of my 4 edges are 21¼ inches. I have both those corners lined up to that horizontal line. From here, I'm going to be able to shift it left or right to have it fit. You're going to have all this extra hanging out. The edge of this template is a cutting line. Draw this shape right on top of that fabric. Because it is a cutting line, you're not going to see it in the seam allowance. And since it's going to be a straight line, I'm just going to use a ruler, place it along the line that I drew with pencil, and cut. To sew this star together, we need 4 big squares for the corner and 4 big triangles. These are set in seams, but there is another way we can do it, where we can take that triangle and cut it in half, and take that square and cut it in half. I'm going to show you that way, so you have an option. Before we cut the setting squares, let's addition a couple of different fabrics. The background fabric, in my case, is white. So if I use the setting squares in white, you will end up with more of this snowflake look instead of that sharp point. If we try a dark color, that diamond shape is really going to show with nice points. If we use a neutral, and in this case, I'm going to use a neutral color that is in the center, you still see your points, but it's subtle. Any fabric you choose for the setting squares is going to be great. Depends on the look that you're going for. I'm going to use the dark so we really can notice those points. Divide your piles so that you have 4 and 4 in a stack. So you're going to be making the 4 corners first. This would be that center square, and the 2 ends would be that triangle. To make all of the setting corners, you will need 4 pieces of fabric. Cut the width of the fabric at 24 inches. From each strip, you're going to cut a 24-inch square and cut that square on the diagonal. That 24-inch square cut once on the diagonal is going to fit that corner. From the remainder of that strip, you will have 4 pieces. We need to square them up to be 17-inch squares and cut them on the diagonal just like the big ones. 4 are going to go on one side and 4 on the other. So the 2 short sides onto the arms of the star. You will be able to have a 1/4-inch dog ear on each corner. This is the edge you're stitching down. You have a 1/4-inch hangover. So you're going to be able to put your needle right there in that little V and stitch down. With both of those edges stitched on, when you fold back that triangle, your center seams are going to match up. And those seams are straight with that last block. If for some reason this is not straight, use this edge and just draw a straight line all the way right up to the top. You now can sew this entire piece together. Match up those center seams and stitch from one side all the way down to the other. I've continued the theme of pressing the seams open and flat. We have some fabric hanging over at the top where the point is. We'll be able to just trim that little piece off. Follow the edge that you already have cut and trim it off. With that little corner off, I have a straight edge to work with again. That triangle is going to fit right on that corner, and it's a straight seam. Start with a 1/4-inch dog ear and stitch down. And it's not going to come right to the top, but this is going to be all squared up after. Do that to the left and the right side. With the setting squares on, the corners are done. You can take a yardstick or something and make sure that the 2 sides where the diamonds are going to match up are square. That's going to keep this laying nice and flat. Now we can sew the 4 pieces together. With the 4 corners put together, we have this beautiful snowflake in the center and these lovely points coming out. There is a large space between those points to the edge. That's going to give us an opportunity to square it however we want. One last border to put on, and this border was cut at 4.5 inches. Changing the fabric to a quilt really changes the feel to the quilt. Even though this is the same pattern, that darker border and the purple fabric really makes it feel different. It's a fun block to make with your 2.5-inch cut strips. You can use jelly rolls and cut them down or use yardage. I'd like to thank Northcott for sending me the original quilt so that I could share it with you, and I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.